Welcome to Deal Talk. I'm Jeffrey Veit. We're going to talk about avoiding dealer tricks, buying smart, and current events in the auto industry. You can make the best choice and the best deal when you purchase or lease a car, truck, motorcycle, boat, motorhome, whatever they are, whatever your flavor. This podcast will help you. I was reading a bit more in Consumer Report March issue about brands this week. I just couldn't leave that alone, specifically owner satisfaction. This story is simply wrong. I hate to say it because Consumer Report's probably the best magazine out there for reports on vehicles and good information, but they're wrong on this one. The writer is posting his personal preferences because it isn't based on fact. From the other Consumer Report issues in the past, you can see that the information is completely different than what they normally post. This is the same writer that'll end up hurting Consumer Report. We've talked about this guy before. He don't know who Pat's shot at. He doesn't. He's just the wrong guy for that particular subject. For vehicle brand facts, stick to the yearly edition. That's the way to go. But it's crazy to what he does. One of the brands at the top of the list is Tesla. I'm not sure about Tesla vehicles and the fact, there have been fewer sold for fewer numbers of years, and ownership is generally a more wealthy segment of the population. I'm not sure that really means anything on that particular one. It hasn't been long enough to tell a story, and I think that, like I said, the wealthy buy them. I don't think they use them as much as other people use vehicles, or they wouldn't have one, or they have another vehicle. So I don't think that's good in that particular one. I do know it's electric. Then score on those vehicles, you can decide for yourself. You can figure out just from the facts. In fact, this is the subject of this week's podcast. A review of why to buy or why not to buy electric. I'll give you the facts and you decide. I'm not going to make you just, try to tell you how you should think. But the facts are the facts. It doesn't matter really about putting aside global warming, whether you think it's caused by vehicles, fossil fuel vehicles, or whether you think it isn't. Doesn't make any difference. How are the vehicles? How are electric vehicles? Regardless of what the other story is or what causes the other. If you like the show, please take a couple of minutes and do a review of whatever podcast source you use for this. I would appreciate it. If you have already done a review, thank you so much. If you want to make your friends and relatives happy, tell them about Deal Talk. They'll save some money and you'll be a hero. Listeners who need some written material with you to carry with you when you're out shopping, then get a copy of The Informed Buyer from Amazon Kindle or Barnes & Noble Nook. Download it to your phone or your tablet or whatever, and it'll help you right when you're in a dealership, as a matter of fact, in case you don't forget something, right? It'll give you the basics for quick reference, and it's only $3. Beat that deal. Right now during the, inflation is going crazy. It's crazy inflation. In fact, I was listening to a couple of news reports yesterday from, what was the news station? I'm trying to think. It wasn't really a left or right station. They were saying that the statistics about inflation being at 8% now is baloney. It's 8% from a year ago, which was 16%. Anyway, they're claiming it's closer to 14% right now. And some products as high as 20%. Anyway, moving right along. It's $3 for the informed buyer. Spend the $3. You'll be glad you did. I'll guarantee you that. A year ago, we talked about electric vehicles versus gas vehicles. In fact, we've talked about it. This will be the third time. And about a year before that, we talked about it. I said it was going to keep being pushed by the Green New Deal harder and harder and become a bigger issue. Pro-electric people associate electric vehicles with fighting climate change and saving the world. That's what they think. Many of us assume they're correct, and that's why they're forcing them on the people. We assume that their information is right. On the other side of the aisle, from the green, it isn't caused by pro-fossil fuel, like some people want to think. They're pro-gas until there are improvements in the public safety and in the initial cost and the long-term cost. They want to wait until the common sense is better. That's all. They're not against. I think the right gets blamed for not wanting to do anything about climate change, and that's not the case. They're just saying that fossil fuel is not the answer, is what they're saying. Nobody likes climate change. Most scientists say they're not sure if there's anything to do with mankind. But if you're going to accept new platform to deal with it, they need to make sense. In fact, a recent poll I saw on I think it was on, I'm having trouble remembering where I read this, but the most recent poll, I'm pretty sure it was Fox, which is a little right-tinted, but not completely. They said that the poll of scientists done by MIT put the number at 78% do not believe that climate change is an issue for the planet that's caused by mankind. Never mind whether it's cars or whatever. They think there's other things like the rotation of the planet and things like that are causing it, and it's not that much different. We look at a very small window, 150 years. The planet's been around, billions of years, and that's the situation. So this is a very small blink of an eye, and they're saying that in terms of the planet's lifetime, this happens off and on all the time. There are tons of climate change research articles you can read, but don't look at the ones published by the fake news. No, on either side. Look at the stuff you can get from, the scientific journals and things where they're actually information that's given out by scientists that actually have studied the situation, not researchers that take information and research. I found an article that says this, or I found an article that says that. That's not the point. Who's done the research, the scientific research? What are the climatologists from different universities? And you can go on and read their information, and they all pretty much say the same thing that once they're at that level. The key is to stick to the stuff written by actual climate change scientists. That's the key, not researchers or political activists or paid for by lobby money or campaign funding, or stock investments should not play a part in it either, But they do, and then there's the scare tactics they use because they want to put the world in that situation where we have electric vehicles. And I'm not sure of the whole story behind why they're pushing this so hard, because they got to know that it's killing the economy. It's destroying our economy. It's really a huge thing. 90% of the things that you touch and look around your room, wherever you're sitting right now, come from fossil fuel, or at least fossil fuels used in making them. Whereas electric only does one thing. It powers. It goes to a battery and powers. It doesn't make anything else. The world is ending has been predicted numerous times over hundreds of years. It's not happened yet. And is man at fault, or is Mother Nature? Is fossil fuel evil, or isn't it? Many people think the jury is still out on those questions. The facts can be interpreted in both favor. You can make the information look like it's fossil fuels problem is causing the climate change, and you can make it look like it isn't. The point is what makes sense for us financially so that we can survive as a society. It's not a clear-cut answer to it. It's one thing's for sure, that as we do away with fossil fuel, it's really wrecked our economy. It's just we're not ready for it. It's got to be a slower process if we do. As a consumer, though, you should be concerned as the cost-benefit ratio. Support the fight against fossil change as much as common sense dollars will allow you to support it, or not. How it affects your buying does matter. Let's look at electric vehicles in a way regardless of your belief about global warming. There used to be 3 segments of electric vehicles. Now there's really 2, but there are still 3 segments. One is the battery charged by the gas engine, puts help in terms of horsepower into the engine and makes it get better gas mileage because the electric motor is helping it. That battery's charged by the gasoline engine. Vehicle will not run on electricity alone. That's the first type. That's the first one that they came out with, right? The second type is the plug-in rechargeable hybrid with electric, like the original, but with a bigger battery so that you can charge the battery without using the engine to charge it. And you can run short distances on the electric. And then there's the third type, which is the one that's becoming more popular and more stressed, is the completely electric vehicle without gas power of any type. That's the considerations. The hybrids have been around a few years more than the electrics, right? Most major manufacturers have at least one hybrid. There are 100 or something of those. BMW, Toyota, Honda makes them, Ford does. There are many others. The second type, the one I talked about, the hybrid run-on combination of gas and electric power that are chargeable, have a rechargeable battery, combination makes for better gas mileage. It goes farther. And it can, like I said, go on electric. But one of the problems with those particular vehicles, if you run on just the electric, usually you're only talking about 30 or 40 miles that you could go on the electric. They don't have any distance to them. They're not designed for that. They're there to get you, if you run out of gas or something, they can get you to the gas station maybe or something. That would be pretty cool. At low speed, very low speed, 25, 30 miles an hour is all they would do. The best for distance is the GM Volt. The Volt with a 60-mile maximum range for the electric power, is pretty good. If you run out of gas, your gas engine stops, you could get maybe up to 60 miles on that one. But they use it together they're really designed to use everything together to get better gas mileage. I noticed there's some that get 45 miles a gallon of gas, which is huge, right? That's double a lot of vehicles by using that electric motor. I suppose if you're a die-hard environmentalist and wanting to help the environment at any cost, hybrid is a small contribution to the ecosystem. If that's the case. But if you're really concerned about environmental reasons, why bother? You might as well go with a full electric then, right? If you're really concerned about it, I don't think there's enough because those vehicles are very expensive. Those hybrids that will do a little bit of electric driving on their own are very expensive vehicles. You could buy the comparable gas vehicle without all that for, maybe $5,000-$6,000 less. So it's not like you're not paying for that. So without the call to arms for climate change, they really would be a silly choice, right? Total electric vehicles are a completely different story altogether, though, right? They go much further on electric power and need to because they don't have any fuel, so they have to go farther. The Chevy Bolt will do 240 miles, before needing a charge. And the problem is, though, that if you go at highway speeds, it goes for less than that. When they're talking 240 miles, they're not talking about driving 60 miles an hour because on an electric vehicle, whereas on a gas vehicle, gas vehicles get better mileage at those speeds. Electric vehicles get less mileage at those speeds because it's requiring more electricity to move at that speed. And, of course, if you use accessories, radio, air conditioning, things like that, they run on electricity in an electric vehicle. So you must have a little less distance. You got to give up some of your electric in the battery to power those. The newest Tesla can get over 400 miles. I think it's 460 miles. But most electric vehicles are 170, 180-mile vehicles. That's what they get, most of them, and a full charge. Who wants to take a chance and get caught with a dead battery in the bad part of town where most of the throughways go through the cities, right? Or according to Mr. Buttigieg, they were built with bias because the highways go through the part of town where the highways made sense because all the buildings were dilapidated. But it depends on how you look at it, right? Once you need a charge, there are stations available, about 500 per state, close to 600 per state now. I think it's 560 per state. Certainly not as many as the gas stations, but about 3,000 per state. And that's just the gas stations. That's not the ones that, like if you go to Sam's Club or one of those places, they sell gas too. That's on top of that. The charging stations are pretty few and far between. When you think about it, that's about one station every 100 square miles. But there are pros and cons to both, right? Pros to an electric vehicle are that they don't emit any CO2 other than carbon, like carbon gases. No environmental footprint. And if they truly turned out that they made a difference in climate change, well, that would be a big advantage. I'm not sure it's enough, though, and you'll see that coming up to make up for what it's costing. They're very quiet. I don't know if you've ever ridden in an electric vehicle, but boy, they're quiet. Other than the road noise you normally hear from tires, there's nothing going on in an electric vehicle. They're quiet, very quiet. No sounds except the road or if you're playing the radio, but that's it. They're also supposed to cost less in fuel to operate. And that's not so true, though, in the future now. It started out that way, but the electric company, power costs money, electricity costs money. In some cities around the country, electric costs just as much as gas. Go to Boston and drive around, see what it costs you. You can do the proverbial fill up at home. That's another advantage. You don't have to run down to the gas station. That's an advantage, I guess. But those advantages I just talked about, they're about the only advantages. What about disadvantages? And let's go through those. Range anxiety is one, right? This is the number one factor when it comes to EV downsides. That's not the number one, but it's one of the number ones, right? Simply, modern electric vehicles still are range limited due to their small capacity batteries. Most affordable electric cars on the market have a bit more than 150 miles. However, Teslas and some other expensive vehicles offer double the mileage. That's still not comparable to the average gasoline-powered vehicle, not to mention a diesel-powered vehicle, right? So that's one of the things. Another one is long-term charging time. Long charging time is another big problem for concerning for electric vehicle, right? To fully charge the batteries, you need to connect your vehicle to a power source. This can often take at least several hours. However, Tesla and Porsche advertise their models with supercharging abilities. You can put a supercharger on them and they'll charge faster. That means that they can recharge their batteries in nearly 80% in 30 minutes if you have a supercharger. You could for about a half an hour to get 80%. That last 20% is a little harder. Just like your phone, you'll notice that you can charge up your phone pretty quick to 80%, and then it slows down. Even though Tesla and Porsche have made significant improvements, charging is still far from the speed to fill a gas tank. That's still a factor that has to be worked in, right? And those super stations are very few and far between. There's not 500 of those in every state. I'll bet there isn't 50 in every state in the supercharging stations. Even though Tesla and Porsche talk about it, it's really not something that applies because you can't find it, right? Usually people are going to charge their vehicle on an overnight charger at home, right? If the industry doesn't find a solution to the problem soon, it'll seriously hurt the electric vehicle market because it's just getting out of hand. It's got to get done much quicker because it's affecting travel times, and as far as making trips and stuff, it's just going to have a big effect. Trip planning, small ranges and long charging times can put a strain on any trip you take, right? You can't plan a fast trip in an electric without knowing the location of charging stations. You'll also need to know the estimated duration of charging or supercharging and know where they are, right? Other factors to be aware of is the latest weather conditions and temperature changes. Those meteorological circumstances affect the electric car's range significantly. Cold weather is tough on electric vehicles. But you got to know where those places are. There's places in the U.S. where you can't drive from, I think it's Dallas to Colorado Springs, I believe it is. Anyway, that's just one of the examples where you can't drive it in an electric vehicle, period, because there aren't enough charging stations to get you to the other side yet. So those are roads that you would, if you're going there, you'd have to, from Denver, it's from Dallas to Denver. You'd have to get some other vehicle around one because you just couldn't do it in an electric vehicle no matter what, unless you carried a portable charger with you and then pulled over for whatever hours it took to charge it, and then you could, if it was in your trunk. But that's a factor, trip planning. It can be a big factor. So what is the main playground for electric vehicles? Simply put, it's urban areas. The EV's range is longer if you drive in the city, right? Second, there are far more charging stations in the metropolitan areas, so they're really designed for limit using around the city. Also, if you run out of juice while driving in the city, which happens with electric vehicles, you can easily find a cab, a Uber, a bus, or some kind of other form of transportation to get home. But it's something you have to consider because you can't just get out. You run out of gas. You go down to the gas station, get a can, and bring back the gas, and then you drop it off the gas station. It takes whatever time to walk it. You run out of power with an electric vehicle, call a wrecker. You're not going down. There's nothing you can do, period. You're going to have that $150, $200 wrecker bill every time that happens. There's no way around it. You can't get around it. And if you're going to use, there isn't a lot of room in an electric vehicle to begin with because of the large battery, so you don't want to carry a charger around in your trunk, a gas charger. There's more weight. They're already way heavier than the regular vehicle. They're not so environmentally friendly. true that electric vehicles have zero emissions, did you ever think about what it takes to make just one electric vehicle? Apparently, the process of making a big chunk of lithium-ion batteries, as well as their disposal, they aren't recyclable, and getting rid of them is going to be difficulty. Also, electric vehicles demand more electricity. So the charts in the, we hear about it all the time now that during the summertime, big metro markets can have blackouts and stuff. Well, what do you think electric vehicle charging? In fact, in California, they're asking their people, they push electric vehicles harder, and they're telling people, don't charge your car right now. What do you do if you need to go somewhere? Well, it comes from thermoelectric or nuclear power plants. That's where the charging comes from, right? The rising demand for electric power will only raise the level of global pollution. That's far beyond what the internal combustion engines are doing now. That's what it's going to do. 40% of the electric companies in the country run off coal. Well, if you're charging your battery on your electric vehicle with electricity from a coal plant, isn't that kind of backwards here? That's what happens, though. That's what goes on. Since electric vehicles feature the latest, most advanced technology, they cost more. For example, there's a range of electric cars for sale on the current market, with the top models going for over $100,000. There's one that they recommend in Consumer Reports in this month's issue that's $155,000 the way it was tested. I don't know about you, but that's a high price of a house. This is a car that wears out that isn't going to have the longevity. You got to keep that in mind, too. They're not going to have the longevity that a gas engine has. No, because at the end of 4 years or so, you're going to need a new battery. And they say, well, they're under warranty. No, they're not. They're prorated. You could still spend $6,000, $7,000 replacing the battery after 4 years. Even the most basic tiny bumblebee ride, even the smallest electric vehicle there is, tiny little things are $30,000. While there are affordable models like the Volkswagen Golf E and the Nissan Leaf electric vehicles will cost significantly more than the comparable models that run on fossil fuel. There's nothing you can do about it. They cost thousands more. This also brings up resale value, a paramount consideration because these vehicles are not designed for the long haul. With the threat of a new battery and a limited buying market, because people buying a used vehicle, keep in mind, they're buying one because they don't have the money to buy a new one usually. Well, what makes you think they got the money to buy an electric if they can't buy a new vehicle? Well, heck, that's the point. Especially used, resale value will probably be super low. I predict, in fact, it's already hitting the market, that electric vehicles have terrible resale value. Yep, terrible. And that's the way it is, and it makes sense because where are you going to go with it? A dealers take it in trade. They look at this vehicle and they're thinking, well, can I sell it? Do I have anybody to work on it? Can I service it? Can I stand behind it? Those are considerations they have too. And it's not easy to fix them if there is something wrong. If you own an electric vehicle and you forget going to your local shop or fixing it inexpensively, regardless of the type and the model, all electric vehicles require specific maintenance and service procedures as well as extremely high safety standards. So you're not going to get away with an electric vehicle that still uses shock absorbers and brakes and tires and all those things. There's no gain in any of that stuff. Your tires might last longer because you can't drive as far. You're all the time sitting waiting for it to charge. Also, servicing electric cars can be quite dangerous because most of the car's mechanics consist of battery packs under high voltage. Also, in case of a fire, you can't just put out the fire with water. You have to use a special fire extinguisher since the batteries burn at a much higher temperature. Talking about the battery, this supposed green design batteries require approximately 25 pounds of lithium, 60 pounds of nickel, 44 pounds of manganese, 30 pounds of cobalt, 200 pounds of copper, 400 pounds of aluminum, steel, and they weigh on the average 1,000 pounds in the big cars, maybe 800 pounds in the smaller cars. But that's what it takes to build one. And that requires that you got 500,000 pounds of Earth's crust that has to be taken up to build one battery. One. And a lot of this mining is done in Africa by children, right? Think about that. That's where the nickel comes. That's where most of the nickel mines are. All of these must be mined and made from fossil fuel use. They use the trucks and things digging them out of the mines are run on diesel. This is like having a 1,000-pound gas tank. Can you imagine that? Your gas tank weighs 1,000 pounds. Batteries aren't the fuel, though. They just hold the fuel. Electricity and that power comes from carbon-driven power companies. How will we get rid of the old batteries? Do you think these batteries will get cheaper? Almost none of the minerals that they use to build batteries right now are in the U.S. Uh-oh. You think it's going to get cheaper, or do you think when they get us where they're running more and we've got, let's say we had up to 20 or 30% of our cars are electric, do you think they're going to take electricity cheaper? Think about it. Have you ever had anything like that happen? No. No, you haven't. And that's what's going to happen. Safety, this is a big one. This is one that, this is apparent, this would cut me out of electric vehicles totally, the safety. When they catch fire, there's almost no stopping it. In the aftermath of Storm Ian, they were finding electric vehicles that were catching fire because of the batteries in the salt water. Yeah, when an electric vehicle burns, it's intense. You look at them and watch the paper, you'll see electric vehicles getting wrecked and catch fire, and you'll see there's nothing left. They don't put the fire out because it's not because they don't, they can't. It takes, on average, 8,000 gallons of water for the average electric battery catches on fire to put it out. 8,000 gallons? That's 2 fire trucks full of water. Remember that ship that sank off the Azore Islands? I think that was March before last. No, 2 Marches ago. What would it be? March of 2021. An advanced ship, one of the latest built, melted and sank into the ocean because they couldn't put the fire out. I don't know what kind of things you worry about, but those are the kind of things I worry about. I mean, the ship burnt for 2 weeks, and they couldn't put it out, and it finally sank into the ocean with 4,000 electric vehicles on it. Yeah, it was headed for the U.S. I mean, I'd worry about a fire in my house, right? You can't stop it if it catches on fire. Or one of my kids getting hurt because the cables and electric outlets in your garage, you've got all the new electric equipment for charging the vehicle and cables and stuff. I don't want that stuff. My kids around that stuff. I wouldn't. Now my kids are grown, but I wouldn't. I mean, it's the same reason I don't have a gas pump at my house. Do you have a gas pump at your house? Does anybody you know have a gas pump in their house? No, because it's dangerous. This is no different. Did you know, here's another safety issue. You know, EVs have a longer stopping distance requirement? It takes approximately about 15 feet more to stop an electric vehicle at the same speed. Over your years of driving, close your eyes and think, how many close calls have you had? Maybe in a shopping mall or a parking lot or on the road, where that 15 feet would have made a difference. All you need is one. Those close calls with an EV might have been impacts, not a close call. I mean, those are all, well, I don't know, possibilities. Oh, you know, when it comes to your family, how many possibilities do you want to take? I don't think so. One of the main downsides of a big battery pack that's on these electric vehicles underneath your vehicle is it weighs so much, the additional weight. While most modern vehicles are heavy due to all the extra safety and comfort options, electric vehicles are heaviest champions of all. On the smaller models like the Kia Soul EV, the electric batteries are around 450 pounds of extra weight. On a Tesla, it's 1,000. Tesla Model X, it's 1,000 pounds, the battery. I mean, the car itself weighs over 2.3 tons. Heavy vehicles mean more tire wear, more energy consumption, more maintenance. You think the shock absorbers hold up as well under a vehicle that weighs 2 tons as one that weighs 1 ton? I don't think so. Or brakes, or tires. No, but they don't go over that with you when they're talking about. Never mind whether you believe this is going to help climate change or not. I'm talking about vehicles that are electric powered versus ones that aren't. How about cold temperature issues? Like when it's freezing outside, electric vehicles are notorious for displaying specific problems. One of the most common issues is the loss of battery power. It's similar to old cell phones that would stop working once you took them out in your pocket in the wintertime. I remember that. And your phone now will be a little less, just like when it gets too hot, when it gets too cold, it'll be a little tougher to get it to operate. Since the bulk of the electric vehicle market is in Northern Hemisphere, where the winters are cold and snowy, cold weather battery drain can be a big problem for everyday use. Owners report a reduced range and even a failure to operate in especially harsh winter conditions. That could be life-threatening. That's another safety issue. I mean, you could say, yeah, but it's climate change. The problem is everybody believes what they hear. Don't believe what you hear. Don't believe me. Read the facts from scientists. But in this case, we're talking about the vehicles. Never mind whether who's right about the climate change. Is this vehicle make sense for you to purchase one? And I think we're getting a list pretty laid out for you. How about low top speeds? Although there are some electric supercars with insane high speeds, like the Rimac and the Concept One, most regular everyday EVs are quite slow. The top speed of a Golf E or a Kia Soul EV is limited to about 100 miles per hour, for instance, which means in its spectrum, if it only goes to 100, it takes a little longer to get to 60% of that. Having such a low speed is not only disappointing, but it can also be a problem in emergency conditions for European drivers where the speed limit on the highway is much higher. What about them? What about somebody in Europe that's driving the Autobahn? How about highway driving consumption? To fully understand the range problem of modern electric vehicles, you have to comprehend the energy consumption circle, right? The advertised range that many manufacturers brag about is the average or city driving figure. That's what I talked about earlier. Sometimes on an open highway, if you're going to be on the thruway, for instance, you might get 50% less. They don't tell you that, though, do they? The reason that electric vehicles get a lot of energy from regenerative braking, which is the process of getting power, some power back from stopping or coasting. During city driving, you use your brakes a lot, which reduces your energy consumption. However, while driving on the highway, there's far less braking and even no braking, so the batteries drain much quicker. Heavy-duty load consumption. Tesla may tease their fans with a Cybertruck, a rig that's designed to be the first fully electric commercial vehicle. But the truth is, that's far from reality. No matter how strong or big your battery pack is, the energy consumption under a heavy load is excessive. Regardless of the big torque that electric engines produce, when you put a lot of weight on them, they drain the battery, and I mean much quicker. Yes, the internal combustion engine also uses more fuel under load, but not nearly as much as an electric. Everything under load, that's what uses more. But how does that break down? How does that affect distance? When you have a company truck, do you want one you're going to have to worry about it running out of power and you leave your truckload of building materials sitting in the middle of town while it's being charged? And how about most upscale electric vehicles like the Tesla S and the Porsche Taycan have advanced infotainment and driving aid systems as standard equipment? Tesla even has the infamous autonomous driving system, which has proven to be far from perfect, resulting in many crashes, even some fatal ones. Those systems are designed to track your driving habits, locations, charging points, and so on. Are you sure you want your every move to be recorded on a server? That's what an electric vehicle will do when you start plugging into servers, into the charger. It'll record that you had your charging done then. It all goes through the cables, It's like the same things you plug in your alarm clock. Do you notice it finds the time on its own? Yeah, that's because it's all in there. And the other thing is, I don't know about you, there's the one that may not be a factor for you, but there are some electric vehicles that are good looking. There's a few. But most of them are just plain ugly little boxes. Ordinary ho-hum at the very best. In the case of the Golf E and the Kia Soul EV, the design hasn't changed a bit. However, in the case of Tesla cars and the Nissan Leaf, the design is specific to the model and not everyone's cup of tea, for sure. Even the 2021 Mustang Mach-E, which shares many design elements with a regular gasoline-powered Mustang, is not an attractive car. It's nothing like the gas car, right? And most car enthusiasts think the Tesla Model X has a big egg-shaped design failure with falcon doors. I mean, you think about it, not to make fun of them, but they just don't look like regular vehicles. They look like test vehicles. It's like Well, all we're trying to do is not use, gas, and we don't want to produce anything else for you. Some economic experts fear that the mass production of electric vehicles and focus on that kind of technology will destroy the current economic model. That, in turn, will affect global politics and all the worldwide monetary systems as well. If the oil companies lose their monopoly on energy and the oil-rich nations lose their authority on global political scene, the world would be heading to another crisis if that happened. Also, think about the enormous car industry, which all the companies that make fuel-related products such as engine parts and fuel injection systems and transmissions and drivetrain components, all those companies and millions of people will be out of a job, which would put further strain on the economy and the global standards. Now, I'm not saying you keep all these parts companies in business, you don't use electric because of that. I'm just saying that's another factor. And I'm giving you this list so you can decide if it's a smart buy or not a smart buy. Never mind about global warming or not. I mean, there comes a limit to what you'll pay for and what you can afford to give in order to handle global warming. Once you read about it more and get the facts, you'll find that we should be spending our money on how to move the farms and how to get products where the weather changed, how to get things arranged. That's what we should be spending our money on. The EV craze is limited to just a few first world countries and markets in the world, but other than that, electric vehicles in other areas are non-existent. Even China, the world's biggest market, has a hard time implementing any initiatives for electric cars. If you go to remote parts of the world and any of the developing companies, you'll notice that fossil fuels are still the primary source of energy, and that's not likely to change anytime soon. They just can't afford them. I mean, they're crazy expensive. Think about this as it makes sense. Clearly, there are many limits to electric vehicles in general. Even if you own one and are looking to acquire an EV, you should know that it can't fulfill all your transportation need. That's especially true if you have a family and need a dependable vehicle for your family. You can't be out of electric power when your kids are sick. That just doesn't work. You could use your electric vehicle in the city for your everyday commute. However, if you want to go on a road trip with your family, you'll need an internal combustion vehicle due to the range concerns and the personal peace of mind. I don't know about you, but I want to be driving along and on a trip through Pennsylvania and have to coast off the highway down in Philadelphia off the thruway out of power and sit there. No, thanks. Not knocking Philadelphia or anything, but same with New York City. Because of the major roads were all built in the tougher parts, the more dilapidated parts of the city, like they should have been. You don't tear down good apartment buildings to build a highway. Though unfortunately, that's also where there's still other housing that's a low-income area usually, and I don't want to be caught in that. I think that's important. Most drivers lease their electric vehicles and then return them to the dealer after a few years to get a new model. However, those people who have bought electric vehicles could experience great difficulty selling them on the used car market and trading them in at the dealership. There's no question about it. You're going to have a tough time. That's because electric cars depreciate much faster than gas-powered vehicles since the technology is so new and still evolving, and they're not designed to go for as long. You're not going to see any 200,000-mile electric vehicles. You're just not going to see it. Not without them having had a $10,000 or $20,000 battery replaced, things like that. And because of that, people kind of tend to lean towards a 4-year lifespan, 5-year lifespan. That's going to affect it too. That's going to be tough to sell it because, like I said, the people that are buying used vehicles are buying them because they can't afford a new one anyway. And you're going to try to sell them an electric vehicle that's 3 years old and the battery's probably 85% of what it originally was, and it's already overpriced to begin with. And if you're going to sell it for the price of a gas used vehicle, well, look at that whack that person took on the new one. Holy smokes. Insurance costs. It's common for new products to get higher insurance rates. Right now, they're being pushed, but insurance companies know they're dangerous, and they know that they're more expensive and harder to fix. Do you think insurance companies will ignore those facts? Heck no, they're not going to ignore those facts. They're going to charge you more for insurance on an electric vehicle. You watch. And rightfully so, because they are dangerous. I don't care what they tell you, what you see they don't talk about it in the news because the fake news says whatever they want. But the truth of the matter is, those vehicles catch on fire, they burn, and that's it. They catch on fire in your house, you can kiss your house goodbye. That's just the way it is. It's just not an easy thing to put out, at this point anyway. And then there's all the other things in stopping on the highway and running out of gas and your family in the car and you got no power. Call a wrecker and then you get towed in and they charge the vehicle and you spend 4 or 5 hours waiting for the thing to charge, or maybe you only spend an hour on a supercharger, but it's still an hour. And then you get going on the road again and then you got to worry about it again. Think about those things, right? Now you could put in a better charger at your house if you wanted to. You could charge overnight or you can put in a high-powered charger, but you're talking to put in a 240-volt charger at your house. That's what they are. Because remember, the unit that charges your vehicle is already built in the vehicle. What you're plugging into at home is the power. And that power outlet then sends the power to that unit that's in your vehicle. So your vehicle might only be able to be charged at a certain rate anyway. They might not even be able to use a supercharger because that's 240 volt. But to put that unit in your house so that you can do that, you're talking $1,500 to $2,000 extra. I don't know about you, but when I go out to buy a car, I don't even buy accessories that are $1,500 or $2,000. Am I going to spend $2,000 to get a better charger? Right? That would have taken, $2,000 to give me about, I don't know, how many miles would that give you in gas? Crazy. It'd be, 10, 15,000 miles in gas. Just because you put that charger in your house, which is another thing. That's another danger. You got a high-powered 240-volt unit in your house, cable to charge. If there's some kind of mishap or something goes wrong, that kind of stuff, there's no recovery from that. You get ticked with 240 volts, that's the end of it. That's lights out. Yep, that's the same type of charger that goes into your dryer. That's an outlet that's 240 volt. The insurance companies know all this, and they're not going to put up with it. It's like electric companies. Electricity is going up all over the country. Now, they can say, well, it's going up just because it's not going up because of climate change. The climate hasn't changed it hasn't been a change in the climate in 10 years. That's not what it is. It's going up in power because people are using more electricity because they're charging vehicles and they're getting you prepared for the fact that they're going to whack you. When you get an electric vehicle, they're going to charge you the same you're paying for your gas. There's going to be no advantage and a huge disadvantage because you will have paid $10,000 more for the vehicle to begin with. It's like having a pond filled with 1 million fish. And every day you walk by and you throw one more fish. You think you're ever going to notice the extra fish? You think one more electric vehicle is going to make any difference? It's true it affects climate change, or it isn't true? Nope. Here's some other information that might interest you. The USA uses 3 billion batteries a year, and most end up in landfills, where the toxic contents are leaked into nature. Well, think about that. It's going to get worse when you got batteries that weigh 1,000 pounds. They're going to have some sort of special way of getting rid of them. It's not going to be a simple process. It's not going to be free, that's for sure. 68% of the world's cobalt comes from the Congo. 68% of it, cobalt. That's used in a battery. Mining with no pollution control. They are dangerous mines employing children that die early from handling the raw materials. I wonder how the media would react if every electric vehicle came with a picture of the children that die every day mining for the battery materials. How many kids die drilling oil? Oh, that's right. When we say, well, it's not here. Well, it's still children. And that's my point is it's not going to get better. As there's more batteries required for more electric vehicles, there's a limited amount of these materials in the world. And there's going to be other people bidding for them too, because as we go to more electric, like in Europe, if we don't turn the nuclear plants back on, they're going to have to find other electric ways. They're going to be competing for those same materials, which drives up the price, which drives up the cost of the battery, which drives up the cost of the vehicle. And it gets out of hand. It's not something that's going to cure itself simply. They work hard on this, but it doesn't make any difference. EVs cost too much. They're destructive to the environment way beyond what you're led to believe. And if you can put up with the idiosyncrasies and the inconveniencies, and you can afford that cost difference and care nothing about the raw material mining, then yes, then it's right for you. Go ahead and get one. We've been developing batteries and EVs since the first one in the 1800s. This was the first electric vehicle, 1832, I think it was. We've been working on batteries. It's almost 200 years, and they still don't have any distance out of them. When do you take a project and you just finally say, that's it, let's do something else? Well, they're kind of working on something else. They're working on hydrogen, which will be the answer. That's the most plentiful element in the universe. And when they get that cornered, they're already starting to build hydrogen vehicles. When they get it so it's controllable, that's the way to go. That won't cost more. That'll make sense. Pollution will be different. It'll be much lower. Electrics will never make sense economically. No matter what you do, they're just not going to make economic sense. They're an unreasonable burden on the average person. Unreasonable. And for me, electric cars are a future goal, not a present benefit. Not at all. Whatever you think is the reason for global warming, it doesn't change the reality of whether an electric vehicle is good for you or not. That has nothing to do with it. Well, that's Deal Talk for this week. If you have a question or request or even a comment, please call, text, email me. Callers, it's 407-801-4071. That's 407-801-4071. For email, it's dealtalk@mail.com. That's dealtalk@mail.com. Please don't forget to do a review and do yourself a favor by getting a copy of The Informed Buyer from Amazon or Nook. That's the best $3 you'll ever spend. I have no question about it. Want to be a hero? Tell your friends, family, relatives about Deal Talk, and they won't come and call me up and thank me. When they save money, they're going to call you up and thank you. It's going to be you that's the hero. However I can help you, you call me and you'll hear from me. Everybody does. And remember, every payment you get should be CPI, complete payment information. We didn't talk about dealing today. We talk about this every week. When they quote you a payment, you make sure that along with the payment, they're telling you how much the payment was based on, the amount, the number of months that payment is, the interest rate to use for that payment, and any required down payment for you to get to those terms for that payment. Not on just the first time they quote you a payment, but every single time they quote you a payment, you have to include that information. Just to make sure nothing gets changed. That's how you protect yourself without having to go to war. Simple. That's one of them. And every time you get a price, if you're going to do your own financing, you're not worried about the payment, you're going to do your own financing at the bank, well, then you want a price that's all in. Every single cost required to buy the vehicle. The tax, the plates, the dealer fee, aftermarket options, everything involved to get out the door. OTD.